The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question for the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is back in session. It is January 31st, 2026, and once again we are going to look at the situation within Ukraine. Now, before I go any further, I want to mention that I am not at 100% health as of recording this video, but I can assure you that I'm going to get through this whole thing to the best of my ability. And the reason why I decided not to make any videos regarding Ukraine until the very last day of January was because not many things were happening on the front. But because things have been occurring again as of late, I felt obligated to make this video. So, with that all being said, let's get into it. First of all, the Zaporizhzhia direction. The Russians, after completing and consolidating their control over the town of Stepnogorsk, have made pushes north and west towards not just the town of Orikov, but also perhaps the city of Zaporizhzhia. It appears, according to Syriac maps, that the village of Lukyanevsky is under majority Russian control, and Pavlovka has fallen to complete Russian control too. There's also reports that Novoyakovlovka has also fallen to the group of forces Dnieper, but we don't have 100% confirmation. The same can be said for Novoboykevsky. And then going up north, the last village of the bunch, which is still under complete Ukrainian control, which is the village of Maldonivka, will be next on the chopping block. And once this falls along with Zapazny, then we can definitely assume that the Russians will then try to go for Shuvaka, which will then give them the clear passage to the city of Zaporizhzhia itself. Rechny was claimed captured by the Russian forces, but there's no evidence of this, though the odds of this being true are not too unlikely. I think it is plausible that they captured it, but they need to provide video and photo evidence to prove such a claim. And then going to the Gule-Pule direction, there has been a series of reports that have been posted onto Telegram and other social media networks. So, what's been happening here? Apparently, the Russians have completed their capture of Sevyato-Petrivka, along with the fields outside of it. And then, in addition, they have also consolidated their control over the village of Pryaluki, and only know Konstantinovka. The Russians have also captured the strategic railroad junction / town of Ternovate. The Ukrainians released a video the other day suggesting that they still hold control of the town. But when it was revealed that the footage was unsurprisingly old because the weather was completely different from the one that Vostok group released through their VoNDV channel on Telegram, many came to the conclusion that Ternovate was under Russian control, and that the Kiev regime was lying, as usual. So, with Ternovate under Russian control, it further increases pressure on the main supply route to Orikov, and also further increases the odds of a greater Russian assault on the city of Zaporizhzhia, which I do believe is going to occur in the next 5 to 6 months. So probably around late spring to early summer, we should expect something in the outskirts of Zaporizhzhia city. And then going to the Novopavlovka / Dnipropetrovsk direction, the Russians have claimed control over more fields outside of the village of Novopavlovka, and if you ask for my opinion, I think most of Novopavlovka is under Russian control. It's just some mappers, I guess, are hesitant to color at least this part of Novopavlovka under Russian control. And I honestly don't blame them whatsoever for wanting to do that, but we got to be honest with ourselves for a second. It's very likely that the Ukrainians no longer hold this side of the river, of the Solina River, that is, and that they have already evacuated most of their troops to the town of Mazova, which is also in Dnipropetrovsk region. Now, speaking of Dnipropetrovsk, furthermore, there are reports, according to the Zilka channel on Telegram, that the Russians have broken through into Kolona Mazova and Rypol. Though, I'll be quite honest with you guys, it's not quite certain if the Russian advances here have succeeded. So yeah, we gotta stay tuned for more evidence on that. In the Krasnaya Amisk, aka Pokrovsk direction, the Russians and the Ukrainians are still duking it out for the pig farms here for some reason, which I think is really fucking stupid on the side of the Ukrainians. And as a result of the recent clashes, the Russians are about to take control over this coal mine that's outside of the strategic town of Rudenske. And then there's also reports of clashes in the strategic town of Biletsky, which is outside of the city of Dobropolia, or Dobropole. Novi Donbass is reported under Russian control, but we don't have enough evidence to confirm that yet, so that's why Syriac has put it in a gray zone. And then, to add further insult to injury to the armed forces of Ukraine, the Russians have continued advancing in the Dobropole direction, well, at least on the eastern side, that is, by seizing complete control over the village of Turetsky. By doing this, the Russians are pretty much now on a path towards Druskovka, and I am suspecting that they will probably reach the city outskirts within a few months from now, like 3 to 4 months it is, probably around the beginning of summer. So around the same time when we can expect Zaporizhzhia city to be under attack directly by the Russian army. In the Konstantinovka direction, a lot of things have been happening here as of late. Across all of January, that is, the Russians have cleared the entire Kliban Buk reservoir and have advanced deeper into the village of Berystok. There's even some mappers suggesting that it has already fallen to Russia, but again, we need more evidence to prove just that. And there's also some evidence to suggest that the Russians have also broken through into southern Konstantinovka as well. And if this were to be the case, that would be huge because the main part of Konstantinovka is here. Like all of the main commie blocks are here. And I wouldn't be too surprised if the Russians actually do well in southern Konstantinovka, especially now that these high ground areas are under their control, along with this strategic series of fortifications here. And because of that, I wouldn't be too surprised if by April or May, that Konstantinovka would fall to Russian hands completely. I definitely believe it will be an easier battle than Chasiv Yar and Artyomovsk combined. Now, within Konstantinovka itself, the Russians have seized and consolidated control over the train station here and are advancing further west within the northern part of the city, like the northern half of the city, that is. And then, getting away from that, the Russians have advanced in the direction of Slovyansk and the Kramatorsk. They have seized majority control over Minkovka and are contesting right now for the village of Golubovka, along with Privilia too. And then the Russians have also advanced outside of Bandarny and Kramivka towards the village of Nikiforivka. They are also advancing outside of Raznikivka and have also completely captured the village of Zakantine. With this, they now have secured the crossing across the Servetsky Donets River. This is a part of Ukraine that the Russians have not been able to take, at least during the 2022 invasion, and because of this, they will definitely have the advantage in the Battle of Liman. And speaking of which, the Russians are consolidating their control over the outskirts of Liman and are advancing within the northern and eastern parts of the city. In addition, the Russians are also continuing to fight for Alexandrovka and Kurovy Yar. Now, moving further towards the Kupiansk direction, or the Kharkiv direction, there was a recent video that just came out, provided by the Zapad group, that suggested that Novoplantovka was under their control. But some people are already disputing this claim, which explains why Syriac has decided not to paint it in Russian control yet. But going further up north, we definitely do have some video coming out from the villages of Podoly, Petropavlovka, and surprisingly the town or city of Kupiansk-Vuzlove. The footage in question shows that the Russians have not only dug deep into these two towns, but they have taken some control over them. Petropavlovka, for the most part, is pretty much gone. And I honestly don't know why Syria continues to have this area here under Ukrainian control, because it's obvious that they don't have control over this area at all. So I would at least put it in a gray zone, just to play things safe. And then within the city of Kupiansk itself, I think, once again, Syriac is being incorrect here. I think the Russians have control at least over the northern part of Kupiansk, well, at least up until the hospital, that is. But otherwise, I think this should all be gray zone, at least. So, Russians seem to have the advantage in eastern Kupiansk, though things are not quite clear, or as clear as they should be, on the western side. And then going to the Dovorichina direction, the Russians have apparently entered Kutkovka and are contesting for the village. And then going to the Kharkiv direction, well, the greater Kharkiv direction, it is, there have been reports of Russians advancing outside of the village of Katny and Ambarne, along with Chuhunivka. And also, the Russians have also began advancing in this area here, towards the villages of Nesterne and Krole. In the area of Volchansk, the Russians have completely captured Semenovka, and have also captured half of Kravsky. In addition, they have also captured or recaptured all of Storetsia. These villages here are probably cooked within the next 2 to 3 months, so we can expect some sizable Russian gains in the Kharkiv direction, at least here. And then going to the Lipsy direction, within the Kharkiv direction, there is reports that Zeleny has been completely recaptured by the Russians, though we still need at least a couple more pieces of info before we can definitely consider all of this to be Russian-controlled. And then in the Sumy region, the Russians have continued pushing the Ukrainians back, and apparently they are now contesting again for the village of Kendratovka. And also, there is a report that the Russians are advancing along the border here, and also they are advancing somehow, someway, in the direction of Glukov, like in these forested areas here. I don't know if this is a raid or a DRG operation, or perhaps the Russians are definitely going to do something bigger in the coming months, if not year from now. Time will tell. But for now, that's going to be it for today's video. So I hope every single one of you enjoyed this content or found it educational, informative. It doesn't really matter. I hope you all liked the video. Tell me in the comment section below what you think of the recent updates in Ukraine, and I'll see you all next time. So take good care of yourselves, and I hope every single one of you has a good one. Bye-bye, and peace out.